John Neral was 10 years old when his mom told him not to go to bed with a woman until he was married. 18 years later, he came out to his parents as gay. Today, he coaches clients on how to show up in their lives and careers. It's an interesting story, so stay with us.
Welcome to Lean to the Left, home of no-holds-barred commentary, plus interviews with fascinating people. Some of them top experts, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at Lean to the Left. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy.
Now, what does showing up mean when it comes to our personal and professional lives? John Neral works with clients every day, helping them to get unstuck in their lives so they can achieve their potential. He's a certified professional coach who helps mid-year professionals find a job they love or love the job they have. For 25 years, his career was in education and as a corporate consultant for Casio America. He's the host of the Mid-Career GPS podcast and author of Show Up, 6 Strategies to Lead a More Energetic and Impactful Career, and Your Mid-Career GPS, 4 Steps to Figuring Out What's Next. An avid game show enthusiast and professional bowler who won a title on the PBA regional tour, and I'm very envious of that because I love to bowl. John lives near Washington, D.C. with his spouse and their cat, Amy Farah Meowler. John, thanks for joining us today on the Lean to the Left podcast.
Bob, I am so honored to be with you today. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and thanks for the introduction.
John, the first thing, let's do the important stuff first. Where the hell did the cat's name come from?
Oh, so we love the Big Bang Theory. Mayim Bialik's character is Amy Farah Fowler.
Okay.
And so we love a good pun, so we just changed the name around. We went to the local adoption agency. We rescued 2 cats. We called them Sheldon and Amy, and Amy did not like getting along with Sheldon. So Amy now rules the roost here at home.
So what happened to Sheldon?
So we have a 3-story townhouse, and they got into a fight.
Yeah.
And Amy's a rather
So you
large
dropped
cat.
him out the window. Is that it?
Yeah, he pretty much backed her in between the spindles and dropped 14 feet to the main level. And she was mad. And so we had tried everything we could do to acclimate the 2 of them together. And so we had to make a decision. It was a no-kill shelter. We brought Sheldon back. He got a wonderful new forever home. And yeah, it was not going to be pleasant with 2 cats in the house. Amy ended up winning that fight.
That's really funny. I'm happy for Amy. All right. All right. So let's talk about showing up. You say how you show up matters. Tell us what you mean by that.
It's how I end every episode of my podcast because it is honoring the way we choose to live our lives very genuinely and authentically, whether it's at home or at work. How we show up matters is about the differences we make in the relationships in our lives, the connections we build, and we continue to strengthen and reinforce every single day. Throughout my career in education, one of the things that I knew was that I had to show up for my middle school students every day. Bob, if you want a tough audience, teach mathematics to 11 to 14-year-olds. They will tell you when you are great, and they will tell you when you suck at it. And so I had to show up at my best every single day. So I had to show up every day at my best. And through those examples and other examples in my life, if I was going to be successful in whatever I was doing, I needed to figure out what it meant for me to show up.
What other examples in your life are you talking about?
So you mentioned at the top of the episode when my mom sat me down when I was 10 and told me if I ever went to bed with a woman before I was married, she hoped I'd see her face instead of the girl I was with. Okay. And at 10, that's not the message you want to get from your folks. Okay. I grew up in a very staunch religious household. It was not something that, because Bob, you and I think are going to get this reference. I don't know if our listeners will hear it today, but being an avid game show fan, Paul Lynde and Charles Nelson Riley were the ones that I was like, oh, okay.
All right.
and they had that kind of acerbic type humor and things like that. My parents were very clear in what they expected of me. And when I started realizing that I wasn't going to be able to do that, I
Okay.
had to figure out a different way to show up.
Okay.
And so it was through my coming out experience that here are the big things I learned from that. I had to own where I was. There was an opportunity for me to welcome that I was going to live my life as I saw best. And the one thing, Bob, I did not want to happen was I did not want to lose the relationship I had with my parents.
Okay.
And I knew that when I showed up and I told them, and I said those three words, I am gay, they were not going to be happy. And for 22 months, we didn't talk.
Okay.
And it wasn't until my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. And she said to me, before I go into the hospital for my procedure, I want to see you. And I went down to the house, met with them. We had a very intentional conversation. At the time I came out, I was dating somebody. 22 months later, I no longer was with that person. And my mom gloated. And she's
Okay.
like, good. And I go, you don't get to do that.
Uh,
You don't get to disparage my relationship, my friends. I go, my friends were there for me when you couldn't be. So if we're going to do this moving forward, we need to set some ground rules. We set ground rules and made agreements about how we were going to handle disagreements, how we were going to talk to each other, what questions we would ask or couldn't ask. And thankfully, Bob, my mom got through the procedure. She was diagnosed cancer-free 5 years later. And as we were repairing the relationship, my dad passed away suddenly.
oh.
And I'm very thankful that one of the ground rules I set in helping rebuild this relationship was the last thing I would tell my parents was, I love you. And I would mean it. As angry or upset as I might have been with them that day, I would always pause to say, I love you, because if that was the last thing they heard me say, I would be okay with that.
Okay.
It was the last three words both my mom and my dad heard me say to them before they passed. But my dad passed away suddenly. And it was one of those moments where 6 months after my dad was gone, my parents were married for 55 years. And my mom looked at me, and at the time she was in her late 70s. And she looked at me and she goes, I don't know how you do it. And I go, do what? And she goes, being alone, because being alone sucks.
Yeah.
And it was that moment, Bob, where you have that connection with a loved one, right? And I said to her, I go, Ma, you and Dad were together for 55 years. I go, look, I get it. You don't approve. I get it. I go, look, I go, for 55 years, was your relationship based solely on sex? And she's no. And I go, okay, it was companionship. It was a partnership. I go, why am I not entitled to the same thing as you and Dad have? I go, I don't want to go through this world alone. And she looked at me at that point and she goes, I don't approve, but I'll try to understand.
Okay.
And that accelerated a lot of healing for us. And then my mom passed away 7 years after that. And I'm very thankful that she got to meet my now husband and understood him as an important part of my life.
Oh, good. Good. But you know what? You said that it took you 18 years, I think you said, to
Yes.
come out. Why did it take you so long?
I was raised in a staunch Catholic household. I didn't want to upset my parents.
All right, I got that. I understand. Yeah,
No,
sure.
yeah, it took me that long because there was a part of me that just didn't want to believe it was true. Like I remember I would go to bed at night and I would pray to God and be like, God, make me straight. And all of a sudden you have that feeling or that thought and you're like, why is that there? And I had dated women. It was something you did because that was the social norm, was
Sure.
what you were supposed to do, kind of thing.
Sure.
But I remember being out on a date with a woman and dropping her off at home and getting in the car and crying all the way home because it just it just didn't feel right.
Okay.
And so then you get to that point where you're like, okay, this is who I am. And then, okay, my journey was that I thought, okay, I'm just not going to act on it. I'm not going to do anything about it. That gets lonely pretty quick.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not the life I want to have. My journey was, it took me 18 years. It took me 16 until I actually came out, and then it was another 2 years after that before I actually said something to them.
Okay. So it was 2 years you were out, you were living the life that you were living, and then 2 years later you told them. So that 2 years must have been tough for you,
It
right?
was. And in a lot of ways, I was very closeted because I was starting my teaching career. I was working for a public school system. I was non-tenured. It was a district where I later on came to learn that after my first year of teaching, or as my first year of teaching was ended, the PTA, Parent Teacher Association, held a meeting because they wanted to have me removed because they thought I was gay.
Okay.
And in all actuality, that could have happened. As a non-tenured teacher, you can be let go for any reason. They don't
Sure.
have to give you a cause.
Sure.
And there was a mother who was on the board of the PTA. I was teaching her daughter, and she stood up and she said, look, for the first time, my daughter understands and likes math. I don't care what this guy's personal life is. You're not going to do anything to sabotage this guy's career. He never talks about his personal life in the classroom. Leave him alone. That woman saved my career.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And that was because, and we're talking mid to late 90s. We're talking like Will and Grace had just come on TV.
Yeah.
She was advocating for me when she didn't have to. She showed up for me. Absolutely. She showed up for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about going forward. You were a local union leader. What union was that? And tell us about that. And what did that teach you about yourself?
Oh, so I was in a co-president or vice president role of a local education association for 10 years.
Okay.
So what that meant was we had about 170 member association that comprised mostly of teachers and administrative professionals. Everything was around holding up the collective bargaining agreement, having conversations with administration, ensuring that the agreement was being honored. It
Mhm.
meant leading 2 rounds of contract negotiations. We were negotiating a $25+ million budget and ensuring that we got a fair and just contract, which is very interesting right now as we're seeing the UAW striking and the writers striking. So it brings part of that back to me and that part of my life. Bob, here's what I learned. The first thing that I learned was that I learned things about my colleagues I wish I never knew.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
I can't get into those things specifically because I don't want to violate that relationship, but I'll just say people behaving badly,
Okay.
violating contracts, not being professional in certain things. And so while I love the advocacy part of being a union leader, there were some difficult conversations that needed to be had, especially when you're defending somebody who you do that because it's your job, but you don't necessarily agree or support what they did.
Okay.
I learned how to have more intentional conversations with administrators and to be very firm in my conversations about what we needed to uphold as part of the union especially when it came to contract negotiations. We
Okay.
had some really heated discussions at the table and going toe to toe with the Board of Ed and the district attorney and everything. You find your voice. You
Okay.
find your voice to show up and stand up for what is right in
Okay.
that regard. Those were two of the biggest things that I learned from doing that job.
Now, in your book, you write about 6 strategies that you recommend to people for, quote, showing up. Talk about those strategies, would you please?
The S stands for setting ground rules. The H is for having intentional conversations. The O is own where you are. The W is to welcome new opportunities. The U is use your genius. The P is protecting and promoting your brand. When I coach my clients on these 6 specific strategies, we start pretty much where the O is. They have to own where they are. Where are they at in their career, their leadership journey, and how do they welcome new opportunities for what's next for them in their career? Their U is they're using their genius. It's that thing that they're exceptional at. We say, here's the thing as to why you're the go-to person within your organization, or why are you recognized for this particular thing? So that genius is what allows them to show up and add value every single day. And the P, protecting and promoting their brand, is understanding what people are saying about them when they're not in the room, to quote Jeff Bezos, but understanding that their brand and their reputation must be aligned in order to ensure success for them in their professional career. Setting ground rules, or the S, is about the things that they value and how they show up on a daily basis, especially when they're leading their teams or working with their clients, how they honor those values based on those ground rules every single day. And the H for having intentional conversations is to always move a relationship forward. Bob, when we move a relationship forward, it doesn't mean that we always get resolution that everybody's happy about. Moving a relationship forward means we have clarity about where we are in that moment. All 6 of those strategies are things that I implemented in my career because of where I went through on my own personal journey of coming out.
Okay.
Everything from setting ground rules, having intentional conversations with my folks, right on through protecting and promoting my brand. My family said some pretty horrible things about me and what they thought I was doing.
Sure.
You don't get, no, that was one of those things in the ground rules where it's like, look, you can disagree, you don't abuse. So that's when I think about showing up and how I coach my clients, I want show up to be defined in these 6 strategies that give people context for how they move about their life and career every single day.
So how is this received by your clients, and how can they benefit from these 6 strategies?
A lot of the people I work with feel very stuck in their career. And they define stuck as there's no place for them to move up on the org chart, or they feel stuck about trying to move out because they're juggling their careers and their lives all at the same time.
Yeah.
The show up strategies are received particularly well because it gives them a framework. So we typically start with the O, where are you at? What are the new opportunities in front of you? What's the thing you're exceptionally good at that we call their genius? And when we start coaching through that genius and what I call a unique professional value statement, they start getting clarity about what they're really good at and defining whether or not they want to continue doing that work. So they might have a particular skill where they think they're really great at managing people, but they don't have managerial experience. So how do we create an opportunity for them to get that experience?
Okay.
The show up 6 strategies give them a framework for navigating through their career transition. And I can honestly say it is always received very well.
Excellent. Now, my show is Lean to the Left. It's called Lean to the Left. It's called that for a reason, because I lean to the left.
Yes.
And I feel like it's important to talk about some of the issues that we face today in this country. So what does showing up mean for people who tend to lean to the left politically, especially with all of the divisiveness that is prevalent today in the society that we live in?
I so appreciate that question, because the way I think about showing up is to not be silent.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's about being militant, but in some ways, I think there are ways we can be very emphatic about what's important. Showing up means going out to vote. Showing up means standing up for basic civil rights that have been taken away or compromised in some way. The divisiveness that we're seeing right now, more so than ever, I feel sets us back 50, 60 years, decades of progress. And showing up is to ensure that those basic civil rights are honored and they're protected. And so when I think about what it means to show up, absolutely, I will always vote. I will have conversations with people, not who are as necessarily far on the left, but to maybe try to understand a little more where they're coming from and see if there is an avenue to have an intentional conversation to move that relationship forward. I will tell you that I'm not particularly happy with a lot of things that are going on in our Congress right now, especially as we're looking at another government shutdown. Very dear friends that work across multiple government agencies, and I don't want to see them be out of work for any particular reason. It's that kind of thing where, showing up, do your job well, do it to protect people and the necessary civil rights that are there and most needed as a bedrock and foundation of this country.
They're screwing around with the possible government shutdown, that's for sure. But beyond that, in states all across this country, legislatures led by Republicans are trying to infringe on the rights of people, including the LGBTQ plus community.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about that, John. How do you feel about that? And what are some of the important things that are happening, and what do you think people should do about it?
So the first thing, Bob, that I would say is that we need to make sure that people are protected under the law, that when they go to work, that is a safe space for them.
Yeah.
They are free from discrimination, harassment, whether it be because they're a lesbian or gay professional, they're transgendered. If they choose a particular inclusive pronoun, that should be respected. But respect doesn't have to mean you agree. Respect means that, look, I will honor this request in this environment because that is what creates safety. I will share this story with you because my husband and I recently got back from a cruise to Alaska.
Okay.
And it was one of our bucket trip lists. We had planned to go in 2020. And of course, we know the whole world got upended. We're sitting at dinner one night, and there's a table of 4 next to us, 2 men and 2 women. They were a little older than us. I'm going to guess they were in their 70s. And they were having this heated conversation, but I didn't pick up on what exactly they were talking about. The conversation finished and they were getting ready to leave. One of the women stood up and came over to the table and she said, "Gentlemen, I hope we didn't offend you." And I said, "About what?" She said, "We were having a very heated discussion because our granddaughter recently got engaged. And she's engaged to a woman who is transitioning. And we can't make heads or tails out of it." And I was kind of looking at her, right? And she says to me, she goes, "I was going to tag you both in for your thoughts on this." And I looked at her and I said, "I wouldn't even know where to begin." And I said, "Because I don't know that situation." And we saw them later on in the cruise and they didn't bring it up or anything. But as a gay man who has been very comfortable in his male identity, I have no context of what it must be like for somebody who is transgendered to realize that they're born in the wrong body. I know people who are transgendered. I respect them. what I'm saying is that I don't understand their walk, but I do believe that their rights must be protected. And so those are some of the things I think we're seeing a huge thing right now, especially with our transgendered community, that it's one of those things where this is being weaponized or politicized in some way. I don't understand that experience, but I do believe in fighting for their rights.
I think part of I don't know, maybe I'm cutting him too much slack here, but I think a lot of these Republican nutcases that are hitting for these kinds of restrictive legislative edicts, largely, I think they don't understand what's going on in these people's lives. And I think beyond that, I don't think they really give a shit.
I would agree. I would agree, because there's a part of it where they're holding up their agenda, be it religious or otherwise, that they believe their way is the only way.
Exactly. And it's that way, not just on this topic, but on almost.
Say that again?
It's their way or the highway, regardless of what the issue is. It just drives me crazy.
It's ironic to me in that we just had an incident recently where Lauren Boebert was at a production of Beetlejuice in Denver and got escorted out because she and the man she was with were behaving inappropriately, and she was vaping during a performance. And then she has the audacity.
Behaving inappropriately. Exactly what were they doing?
They were groping each other in the private parts, yes.
In the middle of a theater, correct?
In a theater, right? And so then she walks out. She's like, allegedly, according to the report, like, don't you know who I am? Yeah, and you shouldn't be doing that. And so we have one set of rules for ourselves, but then there's another set of rules for everybody else. And I take huge issue with that, because absolutely not.
Absolutely.
That just drives me nuts.
Yeah. Okay, John, anything else you want to talk about?
Bob, I will say this, and in keeping in line with the theme of your show, the next year and 2 months is going to be pivotal. It's going to be very pivotal in terms of where we're headed and what rights are going to be protected and what rights are going to be in jeopardy. And it is more important than ever, in my opinion, that we make sure we honor our right to go out and vote and to do so and get informed.
Absolutely. And it's going to get tougher too, because this coming election is probably going to be like none other that we've ever seen. We're going to have one candidate, likely one candidate, could well be on his way to frickin' jail, and should be. The other candidate, Joe Biden, is 80 something and under attack for his age, which is just frickin' wrong. And the Democrats, I saw a survey the other day that I don't know, 60-some% of Democratic voters who were surveyed would like to see somebody other than Joe, just because of his age, largely. And I just think that is wrong. But what is going to happen? Let's just say that at least one of these courts finds Trump guilty and sentence him to jail. What's going to happen in this country then? And if that happens around election time, I shudder to think what that's going to mean.
You almost think we're headed for another civil war.
I know. It's all because of this idiot.
Yeah. It saddens me that this is where we're at, because we're better than this. Yeah. Look, you know my opinion, my thoughts and everything. I'm going to lean to the left, and you know where I'm going to vote. That's just where it's going to be.
Yeah.
But do I wish that there were more prominent, younger people in both parties that were showing up and stepping up to lead? Yes, I do. Because what are our options after these two?
Yeah, exactly.
The pool doesn't look great.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It doesn't look great. And it's amazing that you think, oh my gosh, this is where we are. And both people, both candidates have approached this as a way that they were going to bridge the divide, and they haven't.
No.
Who's going to be the one that's going to step in and at least find some kind of decorum and less divisiveness than what we have now? I don't have an answer for that. I wish I did, but I don't.
I know it's tough.
Yeah.
All right. You've got a couple of books. We talked about one of them. Where can people find them?
They can find them on Amazon. They're readily available. Show Up: 6 Strategies to Lead a More Energetic and Impactful Career, and Your Mid-Career GPS: 4 Steps to Figuring Out What's Next. They're great books for anybody who is in a state of career transition and looking for a resource to help them.
Boy, I know you'd say that because you wrote them.
I'm proud of them. I like them. They've helped a lot of people, which has been nice. Yeah.
That's great, John. I really am pleased for you that your books are successful and that your podcast is also. And I'm sure your consulting practice, your coaching practice is doing very well. I enjoyed talking to you, my friend.
I enjoyed talking to you as well, my friend. Thank you so very much for the work that you do. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story and have a few laughs. And it was great. So thank you so very much.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this Lean to the Left video and that you learned something as well. Please come back on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that I hope you find interesting, entertaining, and enlightening. And you can check out the schedule of upcoming shows, guests, and topics at podcast.leantotheleft.net. You can also subscribe to our audio version there or to our video shows here at YouTube. And follow us on social media, Facebook at the Lean to the Left Podcast, Twitter at Lean to the Left 1, Instagram at BobGaddy_Lean to the Left, and TikTok at Lean to the Left. Our goal is to be informative and entertaining as we and our guests comment on the latest developments in the news and about the social issues that concern us all. This is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left. Thanks for sharing your time with us.